thank you for joining us today. We're going to have another Dr. Russ air rifle adventure. I hope it's one you enjoy. You know, Dr. Paula and I both enjoy helping people. I think over 1.4 million have visited us from around the world, checking us out as a resource on springers and brake barrels and pistons and PCP and large bore PCP air rifles. That gives us a thrill, and that's what motivates us. I think about 15,700, adding about 100 subscribers a week, and that thrills us too. So I'm assuming you're here today to share our passion for air guns. If so, you'll want to give us a thumbs up. If it's bad, give us the thumbs down. If you have a question about any air guns, if I don't have the answer, I know people who do, and I'll respond in that comment section. Might take me a week or two, but I do. And if you want to be notified that another video's out, I think this is number 126, and we've got about 130 in the line right now. So all of that in about 3.5 years has kept us busy. But if you want to subscribe, you've got to log in with Google, and then you're going to get notified every time we send out a video, which is about 3 to 4 a month. And we'd love to have you join us. Our adventure today is part of a trip that we take once a year. Dr. Paula and I usually get in our truck and head to the south or the west, and just combine some business with pleasure. A hunt, some interviews that are important, whatever. At this time we went to a city that we've never been to, Rogers, Arkansas. And Rogers, Arkansas is very close to the Texas border. It's kind of like Texarkana. It's very close to the border, and it actually merges into another town called Bentonville. Do you know what Bentonville's famous for? That's the headquarters for Walmart. And oh my goodness, we arrived on a Sunday, so we were able to kind of cruise through town and see some of the sights without a lot of traffic. We thought we'd see this nice big headquarters for a Walmart. We were also there to interview the chairman of Daisy and the Daisy Museum. So it was a busy week for us. And what we were surprised in Bentonville, merging in with Rogers, Arkansas, was that on every corner there was a Walmart. Now, it wasn't necessarily the big superstore that you might be used to. So I remember seeing a couple of them just gas stations, Walmart gas stations. There was a Walmart liquor store, just only liquor. So it's obvious to us that Walmart's doing a lot of testing in that town before they put it out around the world. I know I think they're the largest company in the world. They've got more employees, etc. So they're big. And Daisy, we wanted to go through the Daisy Museum. I've been putting this trip off for years. I shouldn't have. Wow, what a trip. And what a nice museum they have. You know, most people go through and get a kind of a walkie-talkie wand, and they listen and hear what all these ancient and new daisies are all about. And we had something a little bit better than that. A vice president of Daisy, factories down the street, but at the museum, as a vice president who retired, and he became the director of the museum. And he walked us through. He gave us that tour. You've got to go. If you have a passion for air guns, I don't care what brand you have, you want to know where it all started and how it started and how big it is today, because I assure you, whatever air gun you have, they don't sell 1 million of them a year, but Daisy does. You need to find out who bought them. How big are they now? All of that is in this museum. At the end of the museum is a little store. I mean, it's a tiny store. But on the walls and tables and everything are all these daisies for sale. Now, they're not the exact daisies you see in stores. No, they're different. This one, you notice how thick that stock is? And these sights and this groove, not exactly this Red Ryder that I'm holding, which has a very thin stock. And this shoots about 350 feet a second. But Daisy also owns Powerline, and Powerlines kick it up closer to about 700. Now here is a Daisy blowback pistol. And I bought about 3 handguns at that little store. I wish I'd bought 30 handguns. It was 30 guns, because boy, they had anything and everything you might want. So when you get a chance, come on down to Rogers, Arkansas. We're going again. And secondly, walk through that museum. And if you want to see a whole bunch of Walmarts, go there too. This is the Joe Murphin I'm talking about. This is the book he wrote. His wife is a writer as well. Something that you might be interested in is over 1 million young people per year go through all of these shootouts, competition with air guns. Not the ones on this table, some very special Daisy air guns. And the top 3 in every state goes to the nationals. And it's a pretty exciting place. In the back of the book, here's some letters from Wayne Lapierre. He's the head of the NRA. Peter Billingsley, he's from California. Governor Mike Huckabee, you probably recall. He ran for president one time. Some of you, a little older, remember a guy named Roy Rogers, a cowboy. He wrote. Here's Steve Womack, a member of Congress. These letters are, and here's John Bozeman, one of the senators. And if you'd like to know, and I did, what does Joe Murphin look like today? I mean, back then. Well, let's just say this. When he was a vice president of Daisy, his hair was a little darker. When I was president of a couple of companies, my hair was a little darker too. Anyway, what a great book. It tells you some of the things. You know, a lot of people think, you know, I'm not going to go through a museum. What do I need to go through a museum before? Well, I can tell you, it's enhanced my airgun passion. For example, I learned a lot of things I didn't know. Did you know that there was a Daisy for a number of years that was double barrel? When you cocked it, you could shoot two barrels. Did you know that BBs don't stand for ball bearing? I thought they did. And that there's all kinds of BBs. There was a small BB, and the museum tells you where that came from. But here's just some regular old BBs. Here's some Daisy BBs, and it's kind of hard to see, but these are precision BBs. Joe gave me a gift. Not one gift, but he gave me a great gift. I didn't know that there was match grade BBs. So don't think of BBs as just one kind of BBs. You learn all that in the museum. You're going to learn that during World War II, all the companies, including the big ones here in Michigan, General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, they weren't allowed to have any metal, so they quit making cars. Any metal went to airplanes and tanks and Jeeps, and they're still making them here in the Detroit area. But it affected Daisy. Daisy switched over to some wood toy guns during the war because they couldn't get metal. And what metal they did get, they were helping the United States Navy with double barrels machine guns that were used on the side of naval ships to shoot down the enemy. I didn't know that. And so they made that device for training. And it's, one of them is in this museum. And they've had to fly a flag in a circle. And the trainee is trying to shoot that flag. What an interesting history. And Daisy started right here in Michigan. It's down in Arkansas today. And they make a lot of guns, and they're not anywhere just daisies. There's the daisies kind of go up to about 350 feet a second. Then they go into the power line, and that's where they get much higher. And then they get into Winchester, and those guns are about 1,200 feet a second. Large bore, wood stock. Now, there's a power line that looks just like this. This isn't that gun. This is the Winchester version of that gun. They make a lot of guns. And if you really have a passion for air guns, you're going to want to be knowledgeable of it. And you probably should know that Hollywood even had a great desire to know more and more about Daisy and be associated with Daisy. Does the name Annette Funicello ring any bells with you? She was the prettiest gal on the Walt Disney Channel. And she loved the Daisy Company and showed up and was part of some commercials there. Other stars did. There were some movies. Don't Shoot Your Eye Out that came out of Hollywood. So Daisy has a tremendous background. And while BB doesn't stand for ball bearing, let me tell you what Daisy stands for. The first air gun, which didn't look like this, but they looked at it and said, that's a Daisy. Let's get into that museum and find Joe Murphin. Well, welcome to Dr. Russ Air Rifle Adventures, and we've got one today, and tomorrow we'll be filming the Daisy manufacturing plant, but for today we're going to be doing the Daisy Museum. Dr. Paula, look what I'm standing next to. This company got started in 1880 something. So it's been around a lot. And this is what people think about when you talk about air guns. Oh, just a Daisy. Well, today the industry is much, much bigger. Here's the entrance to the museum. We'll be going in there in just a minute. '86. I don't know a lot about Daisy, but I do know that they make Daisy air guns, and they make Power Line, which are the more powerful today, and Gammo bought them. I think Gammo bought them just so that they could get into all those stores that Daisy's already in. There's some bargains inside the Daisy Museum. We'll get to those in a minute. Lots of bargains. Well, now that we're inside the Daisy Museum, we'll let everybody see what we're seeing. And better still, why don't we have an expert, a former vice president of Daisy, now the chairman of this nonprofit museum, Joe Murphin. Joe, give us a little rundown of what you've got here.
Welcome, Russ. So glad to have you visit with us today. The Daisy Museum is a primary tourist attraction here in Rogers, Arkansas, but the interest in this product and this brand is at least national and not international, because everybody grew up with a Daisy BB gun. We all had one. It was our first gun. We've all got stories about us and our parents and our grandparents and a few cousins and friends. And so this is a place where people come to find their old gun and to kind of relive that experience.
And even in buses, they come in buses and whatever.
We do. We get tour buses here. We get groups and organizations, a lot of churches, a lot of senior centers, and we do school tours too. So it's always fun to greet the public and explain how important the Daisy brand is.
What are we're kind of looking at a history of it right here in these two cabinets.
This is a traveling display case from the 1960s, and it indicates that over the years, Daisy has always valued their history and the fact that, the one thing they are is a multi-generational brand. That if you have a Daisy BB gun today, more than likely so did your parents, so did your grandparents, so did your great-grandparents. Yeah. So the brand goes back so many years, over 135 years, that multi-generations have enjoyed shooting a Daisy.
And if people come here and you're not here, you have kind of a mechanical method to get a tour of the place.
We do. We were fortunate enough, one of our board members one time came in here and spent about 13 hours talking about this museum and every display, and we were able to edit that and put it in chronological order. And so we have an audio tour with major displays that are numbered, and you punch the number or listen to the wand and hear all the information that we can present on that case.
And it looks like you might even sell a few guns.
We do. As we exit through the gift shop, you'll see a lot of things for sale, the complete Daisy line, but then we also have things like books and pens and caps and hiking badges and Christmas ornaments and magnets and postcards and t-shirts and all the fun things that people want to take home as souvenir from Daisy. And then we make limited edition guns. We'll commission Daisy to make a special gun that's only available through the museum and which are serially numbered. So this gun, there's only a small quantity of them made, and when they're gone, they're gone.
That's pretty. And has some carvings and even a brass star, gold star in the stock.
Right, that's a kind of a replica. We call it a tribute to the first BB gun, Red Ryder BB gun that was made and given to the artist who drew the Red Ryder comic strip.
The original comic strip didn't have anything to do with Daisy, but they were merged.
Right. The owner of the Red Ryder licensed brand and the artist Fred Harmon came to Daisy in about 1938, 1939 and proposed that Daisy make a gun, call it the Red Ryder, and their promise was Red Ryder will always be the good guy. He wears the white hat in the movies and in the books and in the comics, and he always does good things. He was never a real character, although certainly people did portray him in the movies.
Well, good. What else have we got here?
Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the original history of the company, because we haven't always been a BB gun company, although we have been for a lot of years. The original corporate name of the company to which we trace our history is the Plymouth Iron Windmill Company, and it was in Plymouth, Michigan, which today you would consider to be a suburb of Detroit. Even then it was a small town near Detroit. Plymouth had a railroad, and Plymouth was on a river, and back then if you had a river and a railroad you had industry and people ready to work. And a gentleman by the name of Clarence Hamilton decided that he could make a better windmill out of steel. He named his company the Plymouth Iron Windmill Company. He and 15 local businessmen built a 2-story building, hired a staff, and began making this steel windmill.
Plymouth, Michigan is still there and about 25 minutes from our home.
Oh, isn't that great? So you know Plymouth, it's a quaint town, it's a beautiful little downtown area with a gazebo down there, and people care for their yards, and it's a just picturesque place, I think.
Downtown area, a lot of nice restaurants, etc.
Very nice, yeah. Well, and Plymouth Iron Windmill Company was one of the earliest businesses there. And if you think about it, if you're in the Detroit market, which they certainly were, you have access to people who know how to bend metal and cast bronze and how to plate things and how to weld and how to sweat. And so they had a good staff there, and they were building these windmills. But within about 6 years, they noticed that they could only market it in about a 100-mile radius because it was so heavy to transport. And so Mr. Hamilton, who had invented this all-steel windmill, walks into the general manager's office with this little air gun. Strange looking. It had a wire stock. Some people call it a skeleton stock. It was hinged right here. To cock the gun, you pulled up on this rear sight, which is clamped to the pump tube. And you would pull that back, and it pulled back a V-shaped wire and a plunger rod and a plunger head. And the plunger head was wrapped with candle wicking and dipped in beeswax to make a tight seal in that pump tube. And he hands it to Louis Cass Huff. That was the general manager of the plant. He says, Louis, I think we could sell these. I made this in my home, but I think we could sell these and we could make these in the windmill plant. We've got all the technology, we've got all the people that can do this kind of thing. And so Louis Cass Huff took it, fired it in his wastebasket, and he liked it. Now to fire this thing, you pull back on that rear sight, which set the sear on the trigger. Then you dropped a BB-sized lead shot, and that's where BB came from. It doesn't mean ball bearing, but back then they were lead. It was just a lead size of shot. He drops it down the muzzle, he shoots it outside through a shingle, and he turns to Clarence, and he wants to tell him he really likes this gun. And he says, and there's two different family recordings of this. One is, boy, it's a daisy. The other is, Clarence, it's a daisy. But the idea is, it's a daisy was what we would say today, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Or it's awesome. You know, there's no telling what people would say like that.
And if it shot through, you say a shingle?
He went through a little shingle, yeah. He liked it.
That was awesome enough.
That's where they got the name Daisy. So the first guns are actually marked Plymouth Iron Windmill Co., Plymouth, Mich, patent applied for, Daisy, but Daisy was just the name of the gun at that time. Within, let's see, that would have been 1888. They patented in 1889. 1895, they became Daisy Manufacturing Company. In 1915, they expanded their campus to look something like this.
Here's some of the high points of this table right here.
Well, these are all just memorabilia from the Plymouth plant. This is things that happened in Plymouth. There's a piece of the old floorboards of the plant. If you can imagine that factory being open as a Daisy manufacturing factory in 1895,
it looks like you just step on the BBs. Nobody was there to sweep them up.
I think there was a lot of dirt and grease on the floor, and nobody was there to sweep up the BB. They didn't have a magnet, I guess. But you know, that old plant was part of this entire campus that Daisy grew to become as early as 1915. So between 1895, when the one building that was Plymouth Iron Windmill Company became Daisy Manufacturing, until about 1915, which is what that lithograph dates to, you'll see that not only have they expanded greatly, exponentially, but they also claim they have sales offices all over the world, in London, Paris, Shanghai, Hamburg, Calcutta, Melbourne.
This sign says that you made more air guns than the rest of the world.
I think that's fair to say.
When do you think that picture was taken?
Well, it talks about the Happy Daisy Boy, and the Happy Daisy Boy dates to about 1915. So that's certainly a very early photo. I don't know the date on that truck, but it could be in the 20s, something like this. This picnic photo here is from 1939, I believe.
And that would be all the employees in 1939, and you met at a big park in Jefferson.
That's what it says on Jefferson Street in Detroit. So that must have been a beautiful park.
That's about 30 minutes to Plymouth. So just getting everybody to Jefferson was a
think
trip.
On your way home, you should stop by there, visit that park, relive that experience. So we're just fortunate that the company valued its history, that they brought down some of this old English oak furniture from Plymouth, that they brought down the old clock, which, you know, helped the employees know what time it was out in the plant. And we're glad to have those kind of things survive all these years. And even the Airgun collection, when people come in here and say, you have done this staff, this board have done a great job of putting this together. Well, we have, but it was here. I mean, we had these guns, and they were saved over the years, and we're so thankful for that.
Well, let's continue through here. You know, there's a story, I think. When I was a kid, I was tickled that my buddies had the lever action BB guns, and I had the pump, because mine was more powerful than theirs. But there was a year you brought them all down to 350. Tell us why that happened.
Well, the American Society for Testing Materials, I don't know exactly when they were founded, but they began to organize some rules about air guns and how they would be marketed. And essentially today, there's at least two major classifications of air guns. There's youth guns, which can only shoot 350 feet per second or less. Okay. That would be like a Red Ryder. And then there's adult guns, which can shoot over 350. And as yet, there is no limit to that velocity. And so what they were trying to do is to make sure that if anyone was marketing a gun as being appropriate for a 10-year-old, that it wasn't something that had you know, that kind of velocity or that kind of power.
So if an air gun had the Daisy brand name, it typically would have under 350 feet a second and would be considered a youth air gun. But you all bought Powerline, or started Powerline, and yes, that has over.
And that's all in the same time period. So what do you do if you're going to market air guns to young adults? Daisy felt it was responsible to call it the Daisy Powerline gun, or it's a Powerline gun, and kind of separate the marketing of the two classifications of guns.
And then even later, Winchester approached you.
Right, around 2000, Winchester was interested. They had some air guns in the past, but they said, you know, we're not calling on those buyers. We're calling on firearm buyers in retail stores. We're not calling on the air gun sporting goods buyer. And they said Daisy is, and Daisy has a good penetration, a good representation on the counter in the air gun category. And so we began to work together on a licensing basis where Daisy brought back the old 1894 Daisy gun as a Winchester 94. And Daisy also recognized that the Winchester name meant power to an adult market, and that would be a good sub-brand to use for higher caliber guns. And today they're even making some what's called pre-charged pneumatic guns that shoot large calibers at high velocities.
Yeah, I was looking at one of your catalogs.
Yes, sir.
I was surprised to see Winchester guns made by Daisy, PCPs, and they were large bore, 35 yes, and 45
yes,
caliber.
Hunting rifles. Yes, air guns have progressed since Mr. Huff said it's a Daisy.
Yes.
You talked about this pump gun, and I want to spend a little time on it because it was a game changer in the air gun industry. There was no pump gun. Most were lever actions, brake barrels, side cocking levers, these kind of things, but there wasn't a pump gun. And a man named Lefevre from St. Louis contacted Daisy up in Michigan and said, I've got this design, I want to bring it to you, I want to sell it to you. And Daisy said, well, they looked at his work and they said, well, he's quite the air gun designer, we need him on staff. And so they ended up hiring him, although he protested throughout his career that really what he wanted to do is design air guns. He didn't want to do it for himself as far as that goes. But he designed the Model 25, came out as early as 1914. And so that was the first Model 25 gun made. And it was a pump design and very unique. And there's an interesting little story around the corner I'd like to show you related to that gun.
Well, Joe, in addition to the history of the Model 25, a gun I thoroughly love, tell us something about these pictures here.
Well, this is an interesting display because these young men posed for an ad agency and a photographer in 1913. And I love how they dress. I love the knickers and the shoes and the caps and the tie. They wore ties, for goodness sake, to go out in the woods with air guns and be essentially models for Daisy's advertising and promotion. And this young man was especially good looking. His name was George Rockwell, although that wasn't really his name. He took the name Rockwell because He thought it sounded a little more like an actor's name than his name, which was George Aloysius Room. Yeah, a little different. So there's something here I want you to see. This photograph is a gorgeous photograph of a young man with a lever action gun taken in 1913. Wow. This pump gun we talked about came out in 1914. Look what Daisy did. They took that photograph. You can check every wrinkle and every hair if you want to see, but they took that photograph and then took a photograph of the new gun and put it in his hands.
Sure.
I don't know why they wouldn't just call him back. They also they took the string off his shirt too, which is kind of nice. But you know, they were promoting their new gun, and they liked him. They thought he was the all-American boy, and that's how they chose to promote that first pump gun.
I see behind me that we've got this double barrel shotgun. I had no idea that Daisy made a double barrel shotgun.
There's a good reason why a lot of people don't know about that. In the scheme of things, in both the 40s and the 60s, Daisy made a double barrel gun. When they did, they made 40 to 45,000 each time. Sears was a big retailer back then of air guns. Sears took the first shipments. They committed early. They had to put it in their catalog for Christmas. And the gun sold through, and it sold well. But what it didn't do is resell, because parents that bought their young person that gun found out that they had to cock it for their child every time, because it was like cocking two guns at once.
Oh, sure.
So it's twice as hard as cocking any other break action guns. But they're beautiful guns. The barrels are marked left and right. The ones in the 40s were wood, and the ones in the 60s were plastic. We have a good example of 4 or 5 of them right here that will show you the guns.
And so you quit making them?
Quit making them because of the fact that they tried twice and found out how hard they were to cock, and therefore they didn't resell from the stores. They sold once. So, you know, thanks for collectors. It's something like it was bad for the company maybe, but good for collectors, because here's a gun that only 40-some thousand were made 2 different times, and if you're a collector, you've got to have one and you've got to find one.
Here's something else I have in it. Here's a nice little knockdown targets, but it also is a stand to put the pistol in.
They called that called that gun eventually the Targeteer model. It was a .118 caliber shot, so
not 117,
not 177, but 118. So very tiny shot, and yes, they had a plastic trap with spinners in it, and they marketed it several times in different colors for different retailers. And probably the most important thing to know is, if you're trying to date your Targeteer pistol, is what did the package look like? Because as the package changed, sometimes the gun didn't change. It was just in a different package with a different spinner target.
And this target has spinner targets made out of cardboard and holds the gun in the bottom like that. Interesting.
Yeah, that's old style packing like that with the metal corners is really nice, and the little spinners on the wire are fun, and the little BB tubes, you can't see how small the shot was. We should pour some out, I guess, but you can see that a BB tube that's usually 4 inches high is only about 1.5 inches tall, because it's a very small shot.
I have a collection of arrowheads at home, and you've done some reproductions here, kind of just showing that some of these guns were made when Indians were running around.
Well, you know, in the collector's world, there's BB guns to be collected, and then there's all these tangential items that Daisy made. They made, as you can imagine, pocket knives and arrowheads. Young people used to like to collect that type of thing. There's playing cards, there's oilers, there's targets, there's all this tangential thing. And this museum more or less supports the collector market. We invite collectors to contact us, tell us what they have, and we'll do our best to help them know how old it is, and maybe even an approximate value, although we like to stay away from assessing value to things.
And you even got involved in World War II.
I don't think there was a company in America that couldn't be involved in World War II, and there's as you tour this museum, it's all about Daisy and it's all about BB guns, but it's all about American heritage and history too. And during World War II, if you were a company that made a product out of steel, you could use up the steel that you had in your warehouse, but you couldn't get any more. And so you began to worry about what's the future hold for us. Daisy didn't make BB guns for several years. If you look at history of our chronology, you'll see gaps. But you'll see gaps in Whirlpool and Cadillac. They were making tanks. And everybody, pulled together to participate in this war. So these products, in this case, in all of its beauty, because this is how we found it, the case was put together in 1945, and these are the parts that Daisy stamped out under government contract during that time period. We know what a few of them are. There's AC copper spark plug rings that went into the Ford engines that were placed into the Liberator bombers that were being built at Willow Run. So not far. You know where Willow Run is. Yes. Not far from Plymouth. And yes. Daisy had an engineer on loan to that plant during the duration of the war for several years. This anti-tank canister you see here, the one that says 37G, here's an example of it here in this case. It's one of the parts, and our research shows that that was a munitions canister for an anti-tank shell.
Yeah, it was a world war, and everybody got involved.
And this is the flag that flew over the Plymouth plant. So that's 1 star for each man, and they were all men. I'm not erring there. And primarily, again, thinking of American history, women didn't work in factories. I'm sure there's always exceptions, but until World War II, most of them went to work in the plant in World War II to save their husband's job and to have some income so that when he came home, there's something here and they've still got the house. And this is the names of those people who served in the war. The first guy's name up there is Cass Huff. Cass is significant because he's the grandson of the man who says it's a Daisy, to Clarence Hamilton. He flew P-38s in World War II.
Oh boy.
There's a story about him breaking the sound barrier.
Oh, here's this P-38 right here.
And there's one hanging from the ceiling too.
So when I was a kid, my cousin and I made a P-38 model, and it had one gasoline prop engine.
Wow.
And what it had was, it looked like it had two, but it only had one, and that was on the inside, closest to you, so that when you flew it in a circle, it was constantly trying to fly away.
It's tethered.
And I said, no, let's put 2 motors in it. Well, we did. Unfortunately, what we did was we put the old engine on the outside. Well, the old engine was broke in. It had a higher RPM.
Sure.
And about 1/4 of the way around, it turned and came in, and we flipped a coin. I won, and now this plane is flying right at me.
Oh, goodness.
It's winter. We had it launch off of a picnic table, just like an aircraft carrier.
Right.
And as it got closer, I just went into the snow, about 1 foot of snow, and this thing flew right over. But I didn't let go of the handle and the wires that connected it. It went straight across, my cousin tells me. And when it ran out of wire, it just plowed into that snow.
Sure.
Later, we put it back together. We put the best engine on the inside, and she flew just right.
You were quite the engineer back in those days.
Well, believe it or not, we're only halfway through this museum. And it was right about this spot. I said, can I go use the restroom? And I did. And you won't believe what I found. I'll show you those in just a second. But let's pull this video to the conclusion. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to make sure you see that second one and the ones to come. And we got a lot of places to stop on our trip.